Hello and welcome. We have a fun and interesting show for you tonight and a very interesting guest. As we have many years in a row now, I'm interviewing tonight the Minnesota Teacher of the Year for 2015. My guest is Amy Hewett-Olatunde, and she is a teacher at the LEAP School in St. Paul. It's a school for English learners, 15 to 21-year-olds. And we'll hear all about it. Amy just got her doctorate in education from Hanson, and she has had many, many awards. This has been like the year for you, hasn't it?
The Big 40, yep.
Congratulations, Amy. It's wonderful. Well, tell us a bit before we go any further about LEAP and how long the school has been in St. Paul. Just some more background on
Sure. So LEAP is a school in the Midway, right off of Snelling, close to Hamline University. And it's a school that is part of the St. Paul Public School District. It's an alternative site for immigrants and refugees. And so we really cater to students that speak English as a second, third, fourth language. And we have students that are from 15 to 21 years old. And they come from a variety of countries, could be anywhere from 20 to 30 countries in our school at any given time, maybe more than that, representing with cultures, languages, religions, etc. And it stands for Limited English Achievement Program.
And it's a federal and a state mandated program, isn't it?
Well, it's part of the district, so it's meeting all of the state requirements as far as high school is concerned. It's a regular high school, but it's just for a different type of learner that goes to our school.
And how many students are at LEAP?
We have anywhere from 300 to 400, depending on the year.
And how big are the classes? I'm guessing they'd ideally be smaller.
Could be smaller, could be larger. We could have 10 students in a class, we could have 30 students in a class. It just really depends on the level and how many students are at that level of English at that given time.
One of the things that I was intrigued with when I read more about you was that you said the students are eager to learn. And I thought, that right there explains partly why you love your work, which I know you have told me you do. That's not the case for a lot of students in our educational system here, is it?
Well, I wouldn't say that students in other schools aren't eager to learn. I think it's just how they're given instruction and the type of curriculum that they have. And I think that every student, regardless of which school they go to, has really amazing things to offer their peers and also their teachers. And it's just a matter of us as teachers finding that within our students and being able to create that community in the classroom. And so I wouldn't go as far as saying that most students aren't engaged to learn, but at LEAP and just with English learners in general, they are very motivated. They're coming from many different countries where they weren't offered education. It was denied to them because of government situations, war, civil war, etc. And so it really is a luxury to have a formal education and be able to come to school every day and not have to worry about what tomorrow will bring. So they're very eager to learn.
And I read that the respect they have as a group or as students for teachers is very high.
Very high.
That's gotta feel great.
Well, they come from cultures where there is definitely a hierarchy of who they respect, and they respect their elders, they respect their parents, they're very respectful to people that are older than them. And a teacher is also one of those people that they respect. But I also think it's a matter of you respecting the learners that are in your classroom, so there's a reciprocal process of that family or community that's built.
I'm sure you're showing them respect, you know.
Exactly.
Comes back. I read that only about 7% of our students in the country are English learners, or students who didn't grow up with English. Does that sound accurate to you? Is that about right?
It's a little bit higher in Minnesota. I don't have the exact number. I want to say it's closer to 10%. If I'm wrong, I apologize. But Minnesota has a pretty high population of English learners. And as the years will progress, we're going to be seeing a higher population, higher percentage of students from other countries that don't speak English as their first language. And so we really need to be aware of how we're going to best serve them academically in the classrooms around the state.
I was intrigued by a lot of things I read preparing for this show, but another one was the benefit for our society, our whole country, by really supporting these learners. The baby boomers retiring, quitting work, we're going to need lots of young people to fill spots. And do you think the English learners you're working with, do they see the value that they can bring to our society, or are they, you know, thinking more as individuals?
Well, a lot of them are coming from collectivist society where they had communities and they helped each other regardless of whether they were related to that person or lived next to that person. Whether or not they're aware that they have these opportunities, these long-term opportunities, those are things that educators need to teach them about, because many of them come from areas of the world where they didn't think long-term. They thought about survival. They thought about today. Tomorrow was a hope. And so I think that for myself and for other EL teachers, we know the importance of advocating for them, of teaching them how to advocate and teaching them how to advocate for their families and their communities so that they can really show society and the country how invaluable of a resource they are.
That's got to be an exciting part of your job. But as I was preparing for the show, I read that a lot of people in our country don't feel that we have valued the English learners as a country as much as some other countries in the world, as much as we should have. Would you agree with that?
I would say that it's very easy to look at people that are different than us through a deficit lens of what they don't have. And usually language is a huge obstacle. It's a huge barrier between people, because if you can't communicate with someone, it's very hard to get to know them. But the threat there is that people have more in common than they think. And if you can look past that language and you can look past the race and you can look past the religion, you'd realize that we are in this together and it's a matter of us trying to connect with each other. They are incredibly smart, courageous, amazing, amazing people. And I just wish that people around who do view immigrants and refugees with that lens would start to educate themselves and understand that they're not going anywhere. They shouldn't go anywhere, and they have a right to be here and a right to be part of the society.
I'm sure you're following the whole immigration debate at our national level closely, which is maybe a whole nother show. Right. Tell us a little bit about your growing up and your education. What did your parents do, Amy?
So my mother was a teacher. She was a teacher for 35 years. And my father is still practicing chiropractic in Canada, past his retirement age, where I grew up. So I grew up in a pretty small farm town in southern Manitoba. It was pretty, it was not very diverse. We had a population of people that were Dutch. But other than that, it was a pretty Caucasian community. However, my family was a little bit different. My mother was American, and so we were seen as the Americans in the town, and our best friends were from England and from Uganda. And I grew up in a very multicultural life with my mom. She exposed me to many different cultures. We always had exchange students from the Philippines, from Indonesia, Muslims, Christians, all different types of people. And so it was really just a mainstay in my life.
What a good preparation for your work now.
Very good preparation, and just a huge amount of respect for just different cultures and just different people.
Neat. And then you're going to high school, going to college. Did you think, I want to become a teacher like my mom, or
no. My mother and my grandmother always told me that I would be a teacher, and I said, no, I'm going to be a spoken word artist. I'm going to be on the streets. I'm going to be painting and drawing, and my mom always told me you need to be a teacher or a nurse, and then you can go do whatever you want. And
the practical mom.
Exactly. And so I pushed, and I realized that after I'd spent a year abroad living in Norway, and I came back, that I really needed to be serious about my education. And so I had set out to become a German high school teacher. And it wasn't until I moved to the cities after I had graduated. Minneapolis, yes, the Twin Cities, from Moorhead, gone to Concordia College in Moorhead, that when I'd volunteered at an international kids club, I knew what I was called to do, and that was to work with immigrants and refugees. And so my mother and grandmother were right. It just took me about 20, 30 years to come to that realization. So,
and interesting, via volunteering, which we often read as an ideal way to figure out what you want to do. Getting your PhD, was that something that you felt was necessary, or you just wanted to do it?
I love school, and being in school just feels like part of me. And having received my doctorate in education, my EDD, was something I knew I would always do. And it was something my grandmother had told me that she had kind of seen me doing when I was very young, that she saw me walking across the stage getting hooded with my hood, receiving my doctorate. And so it just was something I knew would come, and I was driven to do it, and I'm very happy, but also happy I'm finished.
Yeah, so. I bet. She told me she was working for 5 years on this doctorate, and working into the night. She has 2 little kids, right? It sounded really, really challenging, but as you said, you have
very
high
rewarding,
energy. What's been the most challenging aspect of working at LEAP? And I think we didn't mention, or you didn't, I didn't, that you've worked there since you started practice teaching there.
Yeah, so I was a student teacher at LEAP, and I never left.
Ah, that's unusual.
Unusual, yes. The creator of LEAP, Dr. Jeff Dufresne, his words were, I want you to be able to pay your rent and buy groceries, so I'm just going to hire you. And so that was his way of saying that he saw something good in me as a teacher, and I was there, and I never left, and it's been 16 years now. So, and I have no intention of leaving. I'm asked quite often, you know, am I going to become a full-time professor, because I do teach university classes and have for 7 years, and I feel like I can be a better professor teaching methodologies if I'm actually practicing it in my classroom during the day. So it's where I belong.
So the answer is no, you're not going to
I'm not going anywhere. No.
What's been the most challenging aspect of your work at LEAP? If you think in terms of tough stuff.
I've been asked that question many times. Challenging, it's not challenging in terms of difficult to teach the learners. It's rewarding every day. I wake up and I'm excited to go to school, and I spend a lot of time outside of school planning, just getting prepared for the curriculum that I'm going to be doing with the kids. I would say the most challenging is just preparing them for tests, initiatives that are given by any district that we have to fulfill with our learners. Anything that kind of takes our learners away from real learning is a challenge. And I understand that these things have to be done. It's nothing that we'll ever get away from, most likely. But teachers like to teach, and that's what we love doing. And so when you're teaching to a test, the heart of teaching is not 100% there.
It's too studied, it's too narrow, kind of.
It's too prescriptive, yes.
And do you think the kids pick that up?
Well, if you're able to teach it in creative ways, they don't. But they also understand that the testing is a part of formal education, and we have to accept that. But the ways that we go about teaching them for the test can be done in different and creative ways.
But as you said, you probably have to work to make it creative.
Yes.
Thinking of testing, there's been a lot of controversy about how do we measure success when we're looking at English learners, second language learners, do we need to have a certain standard, or can we look at progress and how much they've grown? How do you view that, and what kind of limits do you have, you know, in terms of the educational system and how you can view that?
Well, it's a little bit different at LEAP. We still have the same standards that are set out by the state, by the Minnesota Department of Education. That's across the board. And our students are divided by language level, not by grade level. And so it's difficult because our students come from other countries later in life. And so just being able to pick up content in addition to learning English is twice as much as anyone else.
Right.
And if you haven't been exposed to formal education throughout your life, that is also another challenge for learners. So when we have tests, it may look like a school like LEAP might have lower test scores, but when you look at the progress that the students are making year to year and in the classrooms, it's incredible how they are able to balance all of this and learn language in the time that they do, and the content in the time that they do, and graduate in the time that they do, and go on to post-secondary education in the time that they do. We have a very high percentage of students at LEAP that follow, you know, continue their education and go on to a post-secondary education.
Wow.
And having spoken to many professors at these institutions, these students are doing really well. They're very organized. They just have a high level of personal rigor that they set for themselves because they know the stakes are high for them.
Do you have a number, Amy, in terms of what percentage do go on to
About
college?
80%.
80, that's
Right.
fabulous, isn't
And
it?
some go on to training programs. Some decide to work for a couple of years. Some stay home. They might have children or raise their families. And whatever they choose to do, as long as they're happy and they're making that choice for themselves, that's all we can ask of them.
What countries, in terms of countries of origin, are you working with mostly in terms of the kids you've taught at LEAP?
Well, it changes from year to year, so it really
Okay.
depends on what's happening in the world. So if there is some type of natural disaster or situation in a country, we will see it at the doors of LEAP. And so I remember when it was 9/11, that changed our demographic in our school. We were mostly an East African school, and then it changed mostly to students that were from Central and South America. Now we have a really high population of Karen students who are from refugee camps on the Thai-Burmese border.
And I bet a lot of people don't even know that.
Right, so they're
that
not Korean,
language.
they're Karen.
Spelled
and
K-A-R-E-N, right?
correct, and that is one group, and so there are many other smaller subgroups, so Karen, Kreni, Chin, Pochin, Saw Karen, there's many different types of groups from Burma that have had to flee into these refugee camps on the border. We have Hmong students, we have Somali students, we have students from Central and South America, we have some West African students, we have just a myriad number of countries that are represented at our school.
Just it's such a learning opportunity, I'm guessing, for the teachers and staff as well as the kids. But you don't speak all the languages
No.
that the kids are
No,
from,
no.
country-wise. You speak about 5 languages, though, correct?
Not fluently, so
But
I
you
mean,
can get by,
yeah,
right?
yeah, I can get by in a couple languages, but I think that it's, you know, I have over the years learned some key phrases in
Yeah,
the languages that the students speak, you know, just so that I can show them that I'm trying to learn a little bit. And a lot of our
Right.
EL teachers, not only at LEAP, but in lots of schools, do the same thing. So,
Can you just give us an example, Amy, of how when you don't know their language and you're teaching them our language and they don't know that? I mean, my mind gets a little hazy thinking,
it's so much fun.
how does this work here? Can
Well,
you just give
there's
us
sure. So
a quick
last semester I
example?
taught a 1C science reading class. So 1C is newcomer students that are brand new to the country. Some may have gone to school before, some may have never held a pencil before. And it was science class. And we start with the basics, you know, colors, shapes, sizes, textures, how much does it weigh, how does it feel? And so there's a lot of things that I bring into the classroom so students can actually see them in front of them. So if we were doing taste, we were doing senses, and we're doing the different types of taste, bitter, sour, sweet, and salty, I would bring in foods that they could try that they've never tried before to see how they react to them. Just so that there's some hands-on, there's also some kinesthetic things that we do in the classroom, so that it's not just only about, I don't speak your language, you don't speak my language yet. There's so many other ways to interact with students that aids in them acquiring English.
So in a sense, is it an immersion experience for them? You're speaking English.
Yes.
You're using, you know, physical examples, which would be greatly helpful, I would think. But they're having to make that leap of connecting.
Exactly, yes. There's a lot of laughter, a lot of confusion on my end, on their end. But it's about having fun with them in the classroom while you're teaching and showing them that they're going to make mistakes and you're going to make mistakes all the time with them too. And it's just a great learning experience for all of us.
Do they as a whole get a lot of support from their families? Or, you know, we hear a lot about how the grandparent generation, maybe the parent generation, aren't wanting to become as English proficient as the kids. Is that a hindrance for the young people when they go home and they're just having to go back to their language of origin?
I think that when you look at just immigration in general, and you look at when different waves of immigrants come to the United States, this is what happens, is that the younger generation that grows up here tends to lose a lot of their native language. And then there's almost like this gap, so when they go home, their parents and grandparents want to speak with them and communicate and share that culture. And sometimes, yes, they do communicate in that language, and sometimes they push against it and want to speak only English because that's what their peers are doing at school.
Right.
And so it's actually, the term that's used there is subtractive bilingualism. So they're actually adding one language but subtracting another one at a cost. So, and I wouldn't say that the older generation doesn't want to learn. I think it's more difficult, and I think sometimes
maybe
that
intimidated by the whole process.
Right.
Understandably, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a harder transition when you get older to start your life over.
Yeah, I think everything I've read says, you know, the earlier we can learn a language, the easier it is, the better.
Well, and you take more risks when you're younger. You're not as conscious of how you're speaking or how you're being received, and so there's a lot more risk taking when you're a younger person.
One of the things I read about you is that you're not only teaching them the basics and language, but you're also working with them on an emotional level.
Sure, yeah.
Or many of them. Does that add to your enjoyment of it, or is that a hard part of your job?
It's hard, but it's crucial. I think that you can't be an EL teacher and not want to know the stories of each of your students that are in your classroom. And I'm a writing teacher, and I do journals and poetry, and we do drama. And those journals and memoirs, if I'm able to expose myself and be vulnerable with them, what I get back from them is that they get to open up, they get to release some things they've never spoken about, they get to move forward from the past, they get to also celebrate and understand that where they come from, whether it is a very poor refugee camp, that it is still a beautifully rich culture, and that they get to celebrate who they are as an individual and get a little bit of a highlight or a spotlight on them. So it's important.
And you use poetry a lot,
yes.
Which sounded fun.
It's very fun. It's a great way to work on them with English because you don't have to worry as much about grammar, and they get to be a little bit more free with their language. And they are so artistic to begin with that it's a great way for them to kind of tell their story.
We want to take a quick break and put on the screen the website for LEAP. So if you want to learn more about her school and where she comes from here, go to leap.spps.org. And then I wanted to see what, if people wanted to read more, could you give us a couple titles of books that you think would be helpful for someone who's wanting to just understand more the life of the English learner?
Sure. So there's a lot of books out there that speak of individual cultures. One of them that stands out the most for me is by Kao Kalia Yang. It's called The Late Homecomer, and it's really one of the first Hmong memoirs that has been written from the Hmong perspective.
The Late Homecomer.
The Late Homecomer, and Late Homecomer is one word.
Oh, okay.
And she is from St. Paul. She's from here, and just a wonderfully poetic, articulated, sophisticated level of language that she used to describe the refugee life of Hmong people from Laos to Thailand and then to the United States. It's been used in many universities in freshman courses. Another one that stands out, and this is not a book, it's a TED Talk, and she is a Nigerian author. Her name is Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, and she has a TED Talk that's called The Danger of a Single Story. And it really frames how we need to look at people and not looking at people through this single story lens of all refugees are the same, but looking at every single person as an individual with a story to tell.
That's a great title, isn't it?
Very,
The Danger
very
of
powerful.
a Single Story. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much
for coming down and sharing some of your philosophy and work. It's obvious why you were chosen, Amy. I mean, I think you're so deserving, and best of luck as you spread some of your insights and knowledge around the state as you will this year, and have fun meeting President Obama and
I'm very excited
Vice President Biden, and
very excited
enjoy
to meet
that.
him, so
thank you and congrats.
thanks so much.
Thank you for being with us. I'll be back again next week. Until then, have a good week.